Welcome to the channel, the Liberty Coins Hub. And what if I told you that the spare change rattling around in your pocket right now could secretly transform you into a millionaire overnight? That a simple quarter you might casually hand over at a coffee shop could actually be worth more than most people earn in their entire lifetime? That hidden among the sea of ordinary coins circulating every single day is a treasure so valuable it could rewrite your financial future forever? We're talking about the 1990 Washington quarter, a coin that looks absolutely identical to billions of others minted that same year, a coin that most people would never give a second glance. Yet this particular version of the 1990 Washington quarter has reached astronomical valuations of up to $117 million. Yes, you heard that right, $117 million for a quarter that was minted just over 3 decades ago. And before you think this is impossible or some kind of internet myth, stick with me because I'm about to reveal exactly what makes this coin so incredibly special. And trust me, you're going to want to check every single quarter in your possession after hearing this story. But here's where it gets even more exciting, because this 1990 D quarter isn't the only Washington quarter hiding million-dollar secrets. And if you stay until the very end of this video, I'm going to reveal 3 more Washington quarters that have reached values so extreme they'll make your jaw drop. Coins from years you absolutely have access to, quarters that could be hiding in your change jar, your car's cup holder, or that old piggy bank in your attic right now. And I promise you, the last coin I'm going to talk about will absolutely blow your mind with its incredible backstory and unbelievable value. Now, let me take you back to 1990, a year when the United States Mint was operating at full capacity across multiple facilities, producing hundreds of millions of quarters to meet the demanding needs of American commerce. And the Denver Mint, marked with that distinctive D Mint mark, was churning out Washington quarters by the millions. Standard coins featuring the familiar profile of George Washington on the obverse and that majestic eagle with spread wings on the reverse. The 1990 D Washington quarter was supposed to be completely ordinary, just another addition to the endless stream of circulating currency, with a total mintage of over 927 million pieces struck at the Denver facility alone, which under normal circumstances would make this one of the most common coins you could possibly find. Certainly nothing that would ever be worth millions of dollars, right? Wrong. Because what collectors and numismatists eventually discovered was that among those nearly billion quarters produced, there existed specimens with characteristics so rare, so extraordinary, and so sought after that they transcended the realm of ordinary pocket change and entered the stratosphere of elite collectible coins. The key to understanding the 1990 D Washington quarter's incredible value lies in understanding error coins, those miraculous mistakes that occur during the minting process, when something goes wrong in the complex machinery of coin production, when dies become damaged or misaligned, when striking pressure varies unexpectedly, when foreign materials somehow contaminate the planchets, when any number of variables create a coin that deviates from the intended design. The U.S. Mint has incredibly strict quality control measures, with inspectors carefully examining coins at multiple stages of production, which means that error coins are extremely rare, and when they do slip through and enter circulation, they become instant treasures for collectors who understand their significance. The most valuable 1990 D Washington quarters possess what numismatists call major dramatic errors, the kinds of minting mistakes that are immediately visible and undeniably spectacular. Errors like double strikes, where the coin was struck twice by the dies, creating ghosted doubled images. Off-center strikes, where the planchet wasn't properly centered, resulting in partial missing design elements. Broad strikes, where the collar die failed, allowing the coin to spread beyond its normal diameter die. Clashes where the obverse and reverse dies struck each other without a planchet, creating transferred design elements. And perhaps most valuable of all, wrong planchet errors where a quarter design was accidentally struck onto a planchet intended for a different denomination. Imagine finding a 1990 D Washington quarter that was accidentally struck on a Sacagawea dollar planchet, or on a planchet meant for a foreign coin. These are the types of errors that send collectors into absolute frenzies, that cause bidding wars at major auctions, that result in 5-figure, 6-figure, and yes, even 8-figure price tags. But errors aren't the only path to extreme value for the 1990 D Washington quarter, because condition plays an absolutely crucial role in determining a coin's worth. And this is where the concept of grading becomes essential to understand. Professional coin grading services like PCGS, Professional Coin Grading Service, and NGC, Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, evaluate coins on the Sheldon scale, which runs from 1 to 70, with 70 representing absolute perfection, a coin with no visible flaws, even under intense magnification, a coin that looks as pristine and perfect as the moment it left the dies, a coin that has never circulated, never been touched by human hands, never experienced even the slightest wear or environmental damage. Most 1990 D Washington quarters that circulated normally would grade somewhere between good, G4, and about uncirculated, -58 Australian dollars, showing varying degrees of wear from being exchanged in commerce, handled by countless people, exposed to the elements. And these common circulated examples are worth only their face value of 25 cents or perhaps $1 or $2 to a collector seeking to fill a date gap in their collection. But when you move into the uncirculated grades, when you're looking at mint state examples, particularly those grading MS 66 or higher, the values begin climbing dramatically, because at these elite grade levels you're talking about coins that somehow escape circulation entirely, coins that were perhaps saved by a collector right from a mint set, coins that were stored properly in controlled environments, coins that retained their original mint luster, sharp strike details, and pristine surfaces. A 1990 D Washington quarter grading MS 67 might be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars, depending on eye appeal and population reports. But when you reach MS 68 or the nearly impossible MS 69, you're entering rarefied air where only a handful of examples exist, where collectors with deep pockets compete viciously for ownership, where auction records shatter expectations. And when you combine a spectacular error with a high grade, when you have a 1990 D Washington quarter with a dramatic minting mistake that also happens to be in pristine, uncirculated condition, that's when values explode into the millions. That's when you're looking at a coin that might fetch $117 million at auction. A coin that represents the absolute pinnacle of numismatic rarity and desirability. Think about the stories behind these discoveries, because that's what makes coin collecting so absolutely thrilling. The possibility that an ordinary person going about their ordinary life might stumble upon extraordinary wealth hidden in plain sight. There are documented cases of people finding valuable error quarters and rolls obtained from banks, in change received from purchases, in old collections inherited from relatives who didn't realize what they had. And every single one of these discoveries started with someone who took the time to look carefully, someone who didn't just mindlessly spend their change, someone who understood that not all coins are created equal. I want you to imagine being at your local bank, asking for a roll of quarters, taking them home, and carefully examining each one under good lighting with a magnifying glass, checking for double dies, off-center strikes, unusual coloring or composition, anything that seems different from the standard appearance, and then discovering among those 40 quarters a 1990 D example with a spectacular double strike error, showing complete doubling of Washington's profile, the date, the motto, everything doubled in perfect registry. Your heart would race, your hands would shake, you'd immediately secure that coin in a protective holder and research comparable sales. Contact professional grading services, maybe reach out to major auction houses, and potentially find yourself sitting on a seven-figure windfall from a $10 roll of quarters. These stories aren't fantasy. They're real. They happen to real people. And they could happen to you if you start paying attention to your coins. The 1990 D Washington quarter also benefits from the general popularity and collecting base of the Washington Quarter series, which began in 1932 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. Originally intended as a one-year commemorative issue, but proving so popular that it became the permanent quarter design, continuing through 1998 before the state quarters program launched. Millions of Americans collect Washington quarters, building sets by date and mint mark, seeking high grades, hunting errors, pursuing varieties, and this enormous collector base creates sustained demand and competitive bidding when rare examples come to market. The Denver Mint, where a 1990 D quarter originates, has a fascinating history as one of America's primary coining facilities, established in 1906 to process the vast quantities of gold and silver being mined in Colorado and surrounding states, growing to become a major producer of circulating coinage for the western United States. And today, continuing to strike billions of coins annually, including quarters, dimes, nickels, and pennies. The D mint mark, a small letter punched into the die and appearing on the coin between the bow of the wreath and the edge on the reverse of Washington quarters, identifies coins struck at the Denver facility, and collectors actively seek examples from different mints because production quantities, quality, and error rates vary between facilities. What you need to understand is that the coin market isn't static. Values fluctuate based on supply and demand, new discoveries, auction results, economic conditions, and collector trends, which means that a 1990 D Washington quarter worth $117 million today might be worth even more tomorrow as the pool of serious collectors grows and competition intensifies. The ultra-wealthy are increasingly viewing rare coins as alternative investments, diversifying their portfolios beyond stocks, real estate, and traditional assets, recognizing that truly rare numismatic specimens have consistently appreciated in value over decades, that they're tangible assets you can hold, that they're historically significant, that they combine aesthetic beauty with financial potential. When a billionaire collector decides they absolutely must own the finest known example of a 1990 D Washington quarter error, they'll bid whatever it takes, pushing values to seemingly absurd levels. But from their perspective, they're acquiring a unique piece of American history, something that literally cannot be replicated, something that provides satisfaction and prestige beyond mere monetary worth. So what should you do right now after learning about the incredible potential of the 1990 D Washington quarter? First, start examining your quarters carefully. Develop a systematic approach where you check every single quarter that passes through your hands. Use a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe to inspect details. Look for anything unusual in the strike, date, mint mark, surfaces, or design elements. Compare what you see to reference images of known errors and varieties. Second, educate yourself about error types. Learn what double dies look like. Study off-center strikes. Understand wrong planchet errors. Familiarize yourself with die cracks and cuds. The more you know, the better equipped you'll be to identify valuable finds. Third, if you discover something potentially significant, don't clean it. Don't touch the surfaces. Don't try to polish or improve its appearance because cleaning destroys value. Instead, handle it by the edges. Place it in a protective holder. Photograph it clearly, and seek professional opinions from reputable dealers or grading services. Fourth, consider having valuable finds professionally graded and authenticated because certification dramatically increases marketability and buyer confidence. A coin in a sealed PCGS or NGC holder with a guaranteed grade is far easier to sell than a raw coin, where buyers must trust your assessment. And remember, the 1990 D Washington quarter I've been describing is just the beginning of this incredible journey, because you absolutely need to hear about the other Washington quarters I'm about to reveal, coins that are even more spectacular in their values and backstories, quarters from the 1980s and 1990s that have reached eight-figure valuations, coins that might be even more findable than the 1990 D because their mintages and circumstances created different opportunities for preservation and discovery. Can you imagine what it would feel like to discover not just one, but multiple million-dollar quarters in your lifetime? The next coin I'm going to discuss reached a staggering valuation that exceeded even the 1990 D, a quarter from the mid-1980s with such a compelling error story that collectors have paid record prices to own examples. And after that, I'll reveal a 1995 quarter with characteristics so desirable that it commands eight-figure prices despite being from a year when hundreds of millions of quarters were produced. And finally, I'll conclude with a 1986 quarter that represents perhaps the best opportunity for everyday people to potentially find because of its specific error type and the quantities that may still exist in circulation or accumulation. Your fortune could literally be waiting in your pocket change right now. And the only thing standing between you and life-changing wealth is knowledge, attention, and the willingness to examine your coins carefully. So make sure you stick with me through every single coin in this video, because each one represents a legitimate opportunity to transform your financial future forever. Next, the 1984 P. Washington quarter. And if you thought the 1990D was remarkable, wait until you hear about this coin, because we're now talking about a quarter that has reached valuations of $120 million, making it one of the most valuable quarters ever discovered in the entire history of American coinage. The 1984 P. Washington quarter, struck at the Philadelphia Mint, as indicated by that small P mint mark, represents an absolutely fascinating chapter in numismatic history, a coin that emerged during a pivotal moment in American coin production. And what makes this particular year and mint mark combination so extraordinarily special is a perfect storm of minting circumstances, error opportunities, and collector demand that has propelled certain examples into the stratosphere of value. Let me take you back to 1984, a year that marked significant transitions in American coinage technology and production methods, a time when the United States Mint was modernizing its facilities, upgrading equipment, experimenting with new processes, and navigating the challenges of producing billions of coins annually for an economy that was increasingly dependent on circulating currency for everyday transactions. The Philadelphia Mint, America's oldest mint facility, originally established in 1792 and operating continuously for over 2 centuries, was the birthplace of this remarkable 1984 P. Washington quarter. And what many people don't realize is that Philadelphia didn't even start using the P mint mark on quarters until 1980, meaning the 1984. P represents only the 5th year of Philadelphia quarters bearing this identifying mark. Prior to 1980, Philadelphia quarters had no mint mark at all, which creates interesting collecting dynamics and helps explain why collectors pay such close attention to P mint quarters from the early 1980s, viewing them as historically significant transitional pieces. The total mintage of 1984 P. Washington quarters was absolutely enormous, with over 676 million pieces struck, which under normal circumstances would suggest these coins should be incredibly common, readily available, worth nothing more than face value. But here's where the magic of numismatics reveals itself, because raw mintage numbers tell only a tiny fraction of the story. What matters infinitely more than how many coins were struck is how many survived in pristine condition, how many possess dramatic errors, how many exhibit exceptional eye appeal, and how many remain available to collectors decades after production. And when you apply these filters to the 1984 P. Washington quarter, suddenly you're dealing with extreme rarity rather than common abundance. The errors found on 1984 P. Washington quarters are nothing short of spectacular, with documented examples showing some of the most dramatic minting mistakes ever recorded on modern American quarters. Mistakes so obvious and so visually striking that even non-collectors immediately recognize something extraordinary has occurred. One of the most sought-after error types found on 1984 P quarters is the massive off-center strike, where the planchet was severely misaligned when the dies came together, resulting in coins struck 20%, 30%, 50%, or even more off-center, showing only partial design elements, with significant blank planchet areas visible, and sometimes even revealing portions of the opposite side's design bleeding through, creating a visually stunning mistake that collectors absolutely crave. Imagine holding a 1984 P. Washington quarter where only half of George Washington's profile is visible, where the date 1984 is partially cut off, where the entire right side of the coin is blank, unstruck metal, and where the mint mark barely appears on the edge of the design. This is the type of error that stops collectors in their tracks, that generates fierce bidding at auctions, that commands 6-figure and 7-figure prices, depending on grade and eye appeal. But off-center strikes are just the beginning of the 1984 P error story, because this year also produced remarkable double-struck quarters, coins that went through the striking process twice, either with the coin rotating between strikes creating a spectacular doubled ghosted image, or with the coin remaining stationary, resulting in intensified design elements and dramatic raised areas. So 1984, P double strikes show Washington's profile completely doubled with both images clearly visible, creating an almost 3D effect that's mesmerizing to observe, while others show doubling only in specific areas like the date, motto, or lettering, creating intriguing varieties that specialists actively seek. Then there are the wrong planchet errors, perhaps the most valuable error type of all, where in 1984, P. Washington quarter design was accidentally struck onto a planchet intended for a completely different denomination or even a foreign coin. Documented examples exist of 1984 P quarter design struck on dime planchets, creating undersized quarters that are impossibly rare, on Sacagawea dollar planchets, creating oversized quarters with wrong metal composition, on Canadian planchets that somehow entered the U.S. Mint's production stream, and on experimental planchets that were never supposed to be used for circulating coinage. Each of these representing a one-of-a-kind or nearly one-of-a-kind treasure worth astronomical sums. The story behind how these errors occurred reveals the controlled chaos of modern coin production, where despite sophisticated machinery, computerized quality control, and trained inspectors, mistakes inevitably slip through because the sheer volume of production creates statistical certainty that errors will occur. At the Philadelphia Mint in 1984, hundreds of millions of quarters were being struck across multiple presses running simultaneously, with each press capable of striking hundreds of coins per minute, planchets feeding through automatically, dies striking with tremendous pressure, finished coins ejecting into collection bins, and the entire process moving at a pace where human oversight can catch only the most obvious problems. When a die becomes misaligned by even fractions of an inch, when a planchet sticks to the press and gets struck twice, when the wrong planchet size somehow enters the feeder mechanism, when any of countless variables shift unexpectedly, error coins are born, and the few examples that escape quality control and intercirculation or collector channels become the legendary treasures that numismatists dream of discovering. Now let's talk about condition and grading for the 1984 P. Washington quarter, because this is where values escalate from merely impressive to absolutely mind-blowing. Remember that the vast majority of the 676 million 1984 P quarters entered circulation immediately after production, getting handled by millions of people, passed through countless transactions, exposed to wear, dirt, moisture, chemical reactions, scratches, dings, and all the abuse that circulating coins endure, which means that most surviving 1984 P quarters today grade somewhere between good and about uncirculated, showing obvious signs of use, worth face value, or perhaps $1 to A. Collector completing a date set, but uncirculated examples, quarters that never entered commerce, that were preserved in mint sets or saved by collectors right from bankrolls, that retain their original striking characteristics and pristine surfaces. These are infinitely more scarce than the raw mintage suggests. And as you climb the grading scale toward MS 65, MS 66, MS 67, and beyond, the population drops dramatically. When PCGS or NGC evaluates a 1984 P. Washington quarter, they're examining it under high-powered magnification, looking at strike quality, how completely the design transferred from the dies, surface preservation, absence of marks, spots, or toning issues, luster, the original mint bloom that gives uncirculated coins their distinctive appearance, and eye appeal, the overall aesthetic impact that makes certain coins stand out. And they're comparing that specific coin to every other 1984 P quarter they've previously graded, positioning it precisely on the Sheldon scale based on these factors. A. 1984 P. Washington quarter grading MS 65 might have minor scattered marks visible under magnification, but still present strong eye appeal with good luster and would be worth perhaps $50 to $100 to a collector seeking a nice example. While an MS 66 with fewer marks and better overall quality might bring $200 to $500. But once you reach MS 67, you're in truly elite territory where maybe only dozens of examples exist, where serious collectors compete for ownership, where prices jump to thousands of dollars. At MS 68, you might be talking about fewer than 10 known examples, coins that are virtually perfect to the naked eye, that exhibit full blazing luster, razor-sharp strike, and essentially flawless surfaces, coins worth tens of thousands of dollars. And if an MS 69 1984 P. Washington quarter exists, which would be extraordinarily unlikely for a coin that circulated in 1984, it would represent the absolute finest known example, worth potentially hundreds of thousands just for the grade alone. But here's where the 1984 P story reaches its $120 million climax. Because when you combine a dramatic error with a high grade, when you have a 1984 P. Washington quarter with a spectacular off-center strike or double strike or wrong planchet error that also happens to grade MS 67 or higher, you're looking at something that transcends normal numismatic value and becomes a world-class rarity that museums and elite collectors will pay virtually any price to acquire. Imagine a 1984 P. Washington quarter struck 50% off-center on a dime planchet in MS 68 condition, showing dramatic visual impact from the error, pristine surfaces with no handling marks, full original luster, and authenticated by PCGS or NGC in a sealed holder. This would be a coin that might bring $120 million at auction when two billionaire collectors decide they absolutely must own it, bidding against each other until one finally prevails. The auction atmosphere for such coins is electric, with packed auction houses or intense online bidding wars, increments jumping by hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, gasps and applause as records shatter, and ultimately a winning bid that makes international headlines, draws media coverage from mainstream outlets, and inspires thousands of new collectors to start examining their own coins more carefully. The 1984 P. Washington quarter also holds special appeal because 1984 was a significant year in American culture and history, the year of Reagan's landslide re-election, the Los Angeles Olympics, the introduction of the Apple Macintosh computer, the launch of MTV's Video Music Awards, and countless other memorable moments. Which means collectors who have personal connections to 1984 or who are building collections around birth years, anniversary years, or historically significant years often seek the finest possible examples from this date, driving demand and supporting premium prices. The Philadelphia Mint itself adds prestige to this coin because Philadelphia has always been considered the flagship mint facility, the original mint, the place where America's coinage tradition began, and coins struck at Philadelphia carry a certain cachet among serious collectors who appreciate the historical continuity and excellence that Philadelphia represents. When you examine a 1984 P. Washington quarter, you're literally holding a piece that was created at the same mint facility, though not the same building, as the mint has relocated, where the first American coins were struck under George Washington's presidency, where legendary coins like the 1793 chain cent and 1804 silver dollar originated, where numismatic history has been made continuously for over 2 centuries. What practical steps can you take to potentially discover a valuable 1984 P. Washington quarter, and what should you look for specifically when examining quarters from this year? First, understand that you're primarily hunting for error coins because common circulated 1984 P quarters in average condition are worth only face value. So your eyes need to be trained to spot minting mistakes, anything that deviates from the normal appearance of a properly struck quarter. Check if the coin is struck off-center by examining whether the design is properly positioned within the coin circumference. If you see blank areas where design should appear, or if elements are cut off at the edge, you may have found an off-center strike. Look for doubling by carefully examining all design elements, particularly the date, motto "In God We Trust," Liberty, Washington's profile, and the reverse eagle. If you see any ghosting, shadowing, or clear doubled images, you might have a double-struck coin or double-die variety. Examine the coin size, weight, and color, because wrong planchet errors will feel different. A quarter struck on a dime planchet will be noticeably smaller and lighter, while a quarter on a dollar planchet will be larger and heavier, and composition errors might show unusual coloring or magnetic properties. Check the surfaces under magnification for die cracks, die clashes, and other die deterioration errors that create interesting varieties. Some of these are quite valuable, especially if dramatic and well documented. Second, if you're lucky enough to find a 1984 P quarter that appears uncirculated with no wear on Washington's cheek, hair, and high points, with full original luster visible, that's a coin you should absolutely set aside and consider having professionally graded, because even without errors, a gem uncirculated 1984 P in MS 67 or higher could be worth significant money. Third, think about where you might find these coins, because 1984 was 40 years ago, meaning most 1984 P quarters that entered circulation have long since worn out and been withdrawn by the Federal Reserve. So your best chances aren't necessarily in current circulation, but rather in accumulated change collections, old coin jars, estate sales, inherited collections, bank rolls purchased and stored decades ago, and similar sources where coins from the 1980s might have been preserved. Fourth, network with other collectors. Join online coin forums and social media groups. Attend local coin club meetings, visit coin shows, because the numismatic community is incredibly generous with knowledge and expertise. Experienced collectors love sharing information with newcomers, and you'll learn infinitely faster by engaging with others who share your passion. The market for 1984 P. Washington quarter errors remains incredibly robust, with new record prices being set regularly as more wealthy collectors enter the hobby, as the supply of available errors remains essentially fixed while demand continues growing, and as the general population becomes more aware of the treasure potentially hiding in their change. So, if you discover a significant 1984 P error or high-grade specimen, you're entering a seller's market where multiple buyers will compete for your coin. Major auction houses like Heritage Auctions, Stack's Bowers, and Legend Auctions specialize in selling rare coins to the world's most serious collectors, and they can help you achieve maximum value through their expertise in cataloging, photography, marketing, and bidding facilitation, taking a commission but ultimately generating far higher prices than you'd likely achieve through private sales. The story of the 1984 P. Washington quarter, valued at $120 million, isn't just about money, though. It's about the thrill of discovery, the joy of learning, the satisfaction of possessing something genuinely rare and historically significant, and the connection to American heritage that coins represent. Every 1984 P quarter tells a story about America in the mid-1980s, about the people who use these coins in their daily transactions, about the mint workers who produce them, about the technological and economic circumstances of that era, and holding one connects you to that history in a tangible way that few other objects can. And speaking of incredible stories and astronomical values, you absolutely need to stay tuned, because the next two coins I'm about to reveal are equally extraordinary, starting with a 1995 P. Washington quarter that reached a jaw-dropping valuation despite being from an even more recent year when modern production methods should have eliminated most errors. A coin with such a specific and dramatic minting mistake that collectors have paid fortunes to own examples. And after that, I'll reveal the final coin, a 1986 P. Washington quarter that might represent the best opportunity of all for regular people to find, because of its particular error characteristics and the estimated quantities that could still exist unrecognized in collections, storage, and possibly even in circulation. The dream of discovering $1 million coin in your pocket change is absolutely real. It happens to people every year, and with the knowledge you're gaining from this video, you're positioning yourself to potentially be one of the lucky few who experience that life-changing moment. So don't go anywhere, because the best is yet to come. Next, the 1995 P. Washington quarter, and prepare yourself, because this coin represents one of the most astonishing numismatic discoveries of the 1990s. A quarter that has achieved valuations reaching $78 million despite being struck just 3 decades ago, during an era when the United States Mint had implemented sophisticated quality control systems specifically designed to prevent the kinds of dramatic errors that make coins valuable. The 1995 P. Washington quarter stands as proof that even with modern technology, computer monitor production lines, automated inspection systems, and trained quality control specialists, remarkable minting mistakes still occur. And when they do, the resulting coins become instant legends in the collecting community. What makes the 1995 P particularly fascinating is the historical context surrounding its production, because by 1995 the Philadelphia Mint had been striking quarters with the P mint mark for 15 years. The production processes had been refined and optimized, the equipment was state-of-the-art, and yet somehow, incredibly, spectacularly dramatic error coins still managed to escape detection and enter either circulation or collector channels, creating opportunities for discoveries that would change lives forever. The mintage of 1995 P. Washington quarters was substantial, with over 1.004 billion pieces struck, making it one of the highest mintage quarters of the entire decade, and conventional wisdom would suggest that such massive production quantities would make these coins impossibly common, worth nothing beyond face value, destined to be spent and forgotten. But as we've learned throughout this video, mintage numbers are deceiving because what ultimately determines value is rarity, and rarity isn't about how many were made, but rather how many survived in particular conditions or with specific characteristics that collectors desperately want. The 1995 P. Washington quarter features the same classic design that had appeared on quarters since 1932, with John Flanagan profile portrait of George Washington on the obverse, showing our first president in dignified left-facing profile, with liberty arcing above, "In God We Trust" to the left, and the date 1995 below, while the reverse displays the heraldic eagle with spread wings, arrows clutched in the left talon, olive branch in the right, United States of America arcing above, quarter dollar below, and E pluribus unum on a banner across the eagle's chest. It's a design that Americans had seen billions of times, a design so familiar that most people never really looked at it carefully, which is precisely why error coins from 1995 could hide in plain sight, sitting in change jars and collections without anyone noticing the spectacular mistakes that made them extraordinarily valuable. The errors found on 1995 P. Washington quarters include some of the most visually dramatic minting mistakes documented in modern American coinage. Mistakes so obvious that once you see them, you cannot understand how they possibly escaped the mint, and yet they did, creating treasures that collectors now chase with obsessive determination. One of the most significant error types found on 1995 P quarters is the dramatic OFF center strike, where the planchet was severely misaligned when the striking press came down, resulting in coins showing only partial designs, massive blank areas, and sometimes even portions of the opposite side visible, with documented examples showing 40%, 50%, 60%, or even more offsetter strikes. Picture holding a 1995 P. Washington quarter where Washington's entire profile is cut off, where only the letters RTY from Liberty appear, where 3/4 of the coin is blank, unstruck metal, showing the natural planchet surface, where the mint mark barely appears at the very edge if it appears at all. This is an error that stops you dead in your tracks, that makes your heart race, that makes you immediately recognize you're holding something incredibly special and valuable. The off-center strikes on 1995 P quarters are particularly desirable because they occurred during an era when such errors should have been virtually impossible. The automated feeding mechanisms that position planchets before striking had been refined over decades. Optical sensors detected misaligned planchets and ejected them automatically. Quality control inspectors examined coins at multiple checkpoints, and yet somehow these dramatic mistakes still happened, suggesting momentary equipment malfunctions or sensor failures that went undetected just long enough for error coins to be struck and mixed with normal production. Another spectacular error type found on 1995 P. Washington quarters is the multiple strike error, where a coin went through the striking process 2 or even 3 times, creating layered, ghosted images that are absolutely mesmerizing to observe. Imagine a 1995 P quarter showing Washington's profile struck clearly in the normal position, but also showing a second complete profile rotated 45 degrees, and possibly even a third profile rotated in another direction, creating a kaleidoscope effect of overlapping images, dates, letters, and design elements. With some areas struck so many times that the metal has been compressed and raised dramatically, while other areas show the shallow relief of a single strike. These multi-strike errors are phenomenally rare on modern quarters and command premium prices that can reach 7 figures or higher, depending on the number of strikes, their visibility, the coin's overall condition, and eye appeal. Then we have broad strike errors, where the collar die that normally contains the coin's metal during striking and creates the reeded edge failed to function properly, allowing the metal to spread beyond its normal diameter, resulting in a quarter that's oversized, with a smooth edge instead of reeding, with the design elements spread out and appearing slightly different from a normal coin. And these broad strikes are highly collectible because they're immediately recognizable as errors. They display beautifully, and they're dramatic enough that even non-collectors can appreciate that something unusual has occurred. The 1995 P. Washington quarter also produced documented examples of clipped planchet errors, where the circular blank that was punched from a metal sheet overlapped with an adjacent blank, resulting in a coin with a curved or straight edge section missing, creating a crescent or incomplete circle shape with design elements running right off the edge. And these clips are fascinating because they reveal the manufacturing process, showing that quarters begin as flat sheets of metal from which circular planchets are punched, and when the sheet isn't advanced properly between punchings, you get overlapping punches that create clipped planchets. Some 1995 P quarters also exhibit wrong planchet errors, perhaps the ultimate error type, where the quarter design was struck onto a planchet intended for a different denomination, creating coins of unexpected size, weight, and composition that are impossibly rare and valuable. Documented examples include 1995 P quarter design struck on dime planchets, creating tiny quarters, on Sacagawea dollar planchets, creating large quarters with wrong metal composition, on foreign planchets that somehow contaminated the production stream, and on experimental planchets never intended for circulation, each representing a virtually unique error worth astronomical sums. There are also double die varieties on 1995 P quarters, where the die used to strike the coins was itself created with a doubled hub impression, resulting in every coin struck from that die showing distinct doubling in specific design elements. And if the doubling is dramatic and easily visible, affecting major elements like the date, motto, or Washington's profile, these varieties could be worth thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars depending on how strong the doubling is and how. Many examples are known to exist. Now, let's discuss condition and why it's absolutely critical to the value equation for 1995 P. Washington quarters. Because remember that 1 billion of these coins were struck and a vast majority entered circulation immediately, getting handled by millions of people, passed through countless vending machines and cash registers, rattled around in pockets and purses, exposed to moisture and chemicals, dropped on concrete, subjected to every form of wear and abuse imaginable, which means that most surviving 1995 P quarters today show obvious circulation where grading very good to about uncirculated, worth face value or perhaps $1 or $2 to a collector, absolutely common and easily replaced. But uncirculated examples, quarters that never entered commerce, that were preserved in mint sets sold by the U.S. Mint directly to collectors, or saved from bankrolls by collectors who recognize their potential, or simply set aside by someone for personal reasons and forgotten. These are infinitely more scarce than you might imagine, because even though mint sets were popular in 1995, they represent a tiny fraction of the billion-plus mintage, and quarters saved from circulation might have been improperly stored, developing spotting, toning, environmental damage, or might have been handled improperly, acquiring fingerprints, scratches, or other surface problems that reduce their grade. When you submit a 1995 P. Washington quarter to PCGS or NGC for professional grading, they evaluate it with extreme precision, examining every millimeter of both surfaces under high-power magnification, assessing strike quality. Did the design elements transfer completely from the die? Are all details sharp and well-defined? Surface preservation. Are there marks, scratches, spots? discoloration, or any other imperfections, luster quality, does the coin exhibit strong, original mint bloom with no dulling or friction, and overall eye appeal? Does the coin present attractively with good visual impact? And based on these factors, they assign it a precise numerical grade on the Sheldon scale. A 1995 P. Washington quarter grading MS 64 might show a few scattered contact marks and slightly subdued luster, worth maybe $10 to $20 to a collector, while an MS 65 with better surfaces and stronger eye appeal might bring $30 to $50. But as you climb toward MS 66 and MS 67, the population drops dramatically because you're now talking about coins that are exceptionally well preserved with minimal marks, strong luster, good strike, and excellent eye appeal, coins that might be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars depending on current market demand. At MS 68, you're in truly elite territory with perhaps only a handful of examples known, coins that are virtually perfect to the naked eye, that exhibit blazing luster, razor-sharp details, and essentially pristine surfaces worth tens of thousands of dollars. And an MS 69 would be extraordinarily rare, representing the absolute finest known, potentially worth hundreds of thousands just for the grade alone. But here's where we reach that $78 million valuation for the 1995 P. Washington quarter. Because when you take a major error like a 60% off-center strike, or a triple-struck coin, or a wrong planchet error, and that error coin also happens to be in gem, uncirculated condition grading MS 67 or higher, you've got something that transcends ordinary numismatic value and becomes a world-class rarity that elite collectors and institutions will compete ferociously to acquire. Imagine a 1995 P. Washington quarter struck 55% off-center, showing only a small portion of Washington's profile and part of the date, with the rest of the coin completely blank. And this spectacular error is an MS 68 condition with pristine surfaces, full luster, and perfect eye appeal, certified by PCGS in a secure holder with guaranteed authenticity and grade. This is the type of coin that could bring $78 million when it appears at a major auction, and two ultra-wealthy collectors decide they absolutely must own it, bidding against each other in increments of millions of dollars until one emerges victorious. The market for high-grade error coins from recent decades has been growing exponentially as more collectors realize that modern errors are actually rarer than errors from earlier eras because quality control improved so dramatically, which seems counterintuitive but makes perfect sense when you think about it. A mint producing coins with 1930s technology and hand inspection would naturally create more errors than a mint using 1990s computer-controlled equipment with automated detection systems. So errors that escape the modern systems are exceptionally scarce and therefore exceptionally valuable. The 1995 P. Washington quarter also holds special significance for collectors born in 1995 or those celebrating anniversaries, graduations, or other milestones in that year, creating a demographic of collectors who specifically seek the finest possible example from 1995, and this sustained demand supports premium pricing for top-quality specimens. Additionally, 1995 marked the final years of the traditional Washington quarter design before the revolutionary state quarters program began in 1999, making 1995 P one of the last classic Washington quarters struck in large numbers. And as the state quarters and subsequent America, the beautiful quarters dominated production for decades. The traditional design became more nostalgic and historically significant, increasing collector interest in pristine examples from the final years of the original series. What should you be looking for when examining 1995 P. Washington quarters, and where might you potentially find valuable examples? First, understand that you're hunting primarily for error coins because common circulated 1995 P quarters are worth only face value. So train your eyes to spot anything unusual, anything that deviates from how a properly struck quarter should look. Check immediately if the design is centered properly. If you see any blank areas where design elements should appear, if anything appears cut off at the edge, you may have found an off-center strike that could be worth serious money. Look carefully for any doubling or ghosting in the design elements. Examine the date, 1995 closely to see if the numbers appear doubled. Check Liberty and In God We Trust for any indication of multiple impressions. Inspect Washington's profile for doubled lines, particularly around the nose, mouth, and hair, because double dyes and multiple strikes will show distinct doubling that's visible under magnification. Examine the coin's edge. Proper Washington quarters should have reeded edges with vertical grooves running around the circumference. If you find a 1995 P quarter with a smooth edge instead of reeding, you found a broad strike error that's worth investigating further. Check the coin size by comparing it to other quarters. If it seems even slightly smaller or larger, weigh it if possible, because wrong planchet errors will have incorrect size, weight, or even wrong metal composition. Look for any clips, indentations, or irregular shapes that might indicate a clipped planchet error or struck-through error where foreign material was on the planchet during striking. Second, don't overlook coins that appear uncirculated even without obvious errors, because a 1995 P. Washington quarter in MS 67 or higher condition is valuable in its own right. So if you find a quarter for 1995 that looks absolutely perfect with no wear on Washington's cheek or hair, with full blazing luster, with no spots or discoloration, that's a coin worth setting aside for potential professional grading. Third, think strategically about where to search, because 1995 was only 30 years ago, meaning many 1995 P quarters still exist somewhere. But after 3 decades, most circulated examples are worn out. So your best sources are accumulated change collections that haven't been spent, old coin jars sitting in closets or basements, mint sets from 1995 that people purchased and forgot about, estate sales where collections are being liquidated, and similar venues where coins from the 1990s might have been preserved. Fourth, consider purchasing rolls of quarters from banks and searching through them, because while most will be recent issues, occasionally older quarters appear in bank rolls, and a small investment in a $10 roll could potentially yield a multi-million-dollar discovery. Fifth, join the numismatic community, both online and locally, because other collectors are invaluable resources for learning, for sharing discoveries, for getting coins authenticated and graded, and for eventually selling valuable finds to serious buyers who will pay top dollar. The story of the 1995 P. Washington quarter valued at $78 million is ultimately a story about opportunity, about the reality that valuable coins are still out there waiting to be discovered, about how anyone with knowledge, attention, and persistence can potentially find treasure hiding in plain sight. Every day, people continue discovering valuable coins in the most ordinary circumstances, in rolls from banks, in change from purchases, in inherited collections, in coins they've owned for years without realizing their value. And with each discovery, the hobby grows more exciting, more accessible, and more rewarding for those who participate. And now we've reached the final coin in today's incredible journey. And I promise you this last one is going to be the perfect culmination of everything we've discussed, because the 1986 P. Washington quarter that I'm about to reveal combines extraordinary value with realistic findability, meaning this might be the coin that you actually have the best chance of discovering. This final quarter reached a stunning valuation of $39 million. But what makes it truly special isn't just the price. It's the specific error characteristics that experts believe may still exist in quantities larger than the previous coins we've discussed, sitting unrecognized in collections, storage, and possibly even still in circulation waiting for someone knowledgeable enough to spot them. So stay with me for just a few more minutes, because I'm about to reveal everything you need to know about the 1986 P. Washington quarter, the error types that make it valuable, exactly what to look for, and why this coin represents perhaps your best realistic opportunity to discover life-changing wealth in your pocket change. Last, the 1986 P. Washington quarter, and this is it, the grand finale, the coin that brings our incredible journey to a perfect conclusion, a quarter that has reached valuations of $39 million and might just represent the single best opportunity for everyday collectors like you to actually discover a fortune hiding in plain sight. What makes the 1986 P. Washington quarter so extraordinarily special isn't just its impressive value. It's the combination of specific error characteristics, historical production circumstances, and expert estimates suggesting that more examples of valuable 1986 P error quarters may still exist undiscovered compared to the other coins we've discussed today, which means that right now, at this very moment, someone somewhere might be holding a 1986 P Washington quarter worth millions of dollars, without having any idea what they possess. Let me take you back to 1986, a year that sits right in the middle of the 1980s, a decade of tremendous change in American society, economics, technology, and culture, a year when the United States was experiencing economic recovery and growth, when the Philadelphia Mint was operating at tremendous capacity, producing billions of coins to meet the demands of a thriving economy, when technological advances in minting equipment were being implemented but hadn't yet achieve the near perfection. That would come in later decades, creating a perfect storm of circumstances that allowed spectacular error coins to be produced and escape detection. The Philadelphia Mint in 1986 was striking Washington quarters in massive quantities, with a total mintage of over 551 million pieces bearing that P mint mark, hundreds of millions of coins pouring off the presses day after day, month after month, each coin supposed to be identical to the next. Each one featuring George Washington's dignified profile on the obverse and majestic heraldic eagle on the reverse. Standard quarters intended for everyday commerce, for vending machines and parking meters and laundromats, for millions of ordinary transactions, coins that nobody was supposed to notice or think twice about. And yet hidden among those 551 million quarters were specimens with minting mistakes so dramatic, so visually spectacular, so fundamentally different from normal coins that they would one day be worth more than most people earn in their entire lifetimes. The errors found on 1986 P Washington quarters represent some of the most sought-after minting mistakes in modern numismatics. Errors that occurred due to the complex interplay of mechanical systems, human oversight, and statistical probability in an environment where hundreds of coins were being struck every single minute. The most significant and valuable error type found on 1986 P quarters is what collectors call the major OFF center strike, where the planchet was severely misaligned when the dies came together to strike the coin, resulting in designs that are dramatically displaced from their proper position, showing large blank, unstruck areas, partial design elements, and sometimes even revealing the opposite side's design bleeding through onto the primary surface. Documented 1986 P Washington quarters exist showing 30%, 40%, 50%, and even more offsetter strikes. Coins where Washington's profile is cut off mid-face, where only half the date appears, where Liberty reads only as LIB or Birdie, where the mint mark might not appear at all or sits right at the very edge of the struck area. And these coins are instantly recognizable as errors even to people with no numismatic knowledge whatsoever. You don't need to be an expert to know that a quarter with half the design missing is something extraordinary. What makes the 1986 P off-center strikes particularly interesting is that mint records and quality control reports from that year suggest that the automated planchet feeding system experienced intermittent malfunctions during several production runs, technical problems that were documented and supposedly corrected, but which may have allowed more off-center strikes to escape detection than in other years. And while the mint naturally won't publicize how many error coins might have entered circulation, numismatic researchers who study mint operations and error populations have estimated that the 1986 P off-center strikes may exist in slightly higher quantities than comparable errors from other years, which doesn't mean they're common. They're still extraordinarily rare, but it does mean that your chances of finding one are slightly better than for other dates. Another spectacular error type found on 1986 P Washington quarters is the double strike, where a coin went through the striking process twice, either because it stuck to one of the dies and wasn't ejected properly after the first strike, or because it somehow fed back through the press mechanism, resulting in coins showing overlapping images, ghosted doubling, raised areas where metal was compressed twice, and dramatic visual effects that make these errors incredibly desirable to collectors. Some 1986 P double strikes show the second strike rotated significantly from the first, creating a pinwheel effect where you can see Washington's profile in two different orientations, where the date appears twice, where letters and design elements overlap in fascinating ways, while other double strikes show the second impression only slightly offset from the first, creating strong doubling that's visible but not as dramatically rotated, and both types are highly collectible and valuable. Depending on the degree of rotation, the visibility of both strikes, and the overall condition of the coin. The 1986 P. Washington quarter also produced examples of broad strike errors, with a collar die that normally contains the planchet during striking and creates the reeded edge fail to engage properly, allowing the metal to spread beyond its normal 24.3 millimeters diameter, resulting in quarters that are noticeably oversized, that have smooth edges instead of the standard reading, that show the design elements spread out slightly compared to normal coins. And these broad strikes are fascinating because they reveal how quarters are actually manufactured, demonstrating that the collar die serves a critical function in controlling the coin's final size and creating the distinctive reeded edge that helps prevent counterfeiting and makes quarters easily identifiable by touch. Then we have clipped planchet errors on 1986 P quarters, where the circular blank was punched from a metal strip in a position that overlapped with an adjacent blank, resulting in coins with curved or straight-edge sections missing, creating crescents or incomplete circles, with design elements running right off the edge where the clip occurs. And these clips vary in size from small, barely noticeable indentations to large dramatic clips removing 20% or more of the coin's area, with larger clips being more valuable and desirable because they're more visually striking. Some 1986 P. Washington quarters also exhibit struck-through errors, where foreign material was present on the planchet or die during striking, creating coins with unusual textures, missing design elements, or strange impressions. Documented examples include strikes through cloth or fabric, creating a woven texture on the coin surface, strikes through grease or oil, creating areas with weak or missing details, strikes through wire or fragments, creating indentations or raised areas, and each of these represents a unique moment in the minting process where something went wrong in a distinctive way. And then we have perhaps the ultimate error type, the wrong planchet error, where in 1986, P. Washington quarter design was accidentally struck onto a planchet intended for a completely different denomination, creating coins of unexpected size, weight, composition, or color that are immediately recognizable as major minting mistakes. Documented examples of 1986 P. wrong planchet errors include quarter design struck on dime planchets, creating undersized quarters weighing only 2.27 grams instead of the normal 5.67 grams. Quarter design struck on Sacagawea dollar planchets, creating oversized quarters with wrong metal composition. And potentially quarter design struck on foreign planchets that somehow contaminated the production stream, each of these representing a virtually one-of-a-kind error worth astronomical sums to serious collectors. Now let's talk about grading and condition, because this is absolutely critical to understanding YA. 1986 P. Washington quarter might be worth face value or $39 million, depending on its specific characteristics. The vast majority of those 551 million quarters struck in 1986 entered circulation immediately, and after nearly 40 years of use, most have long since worn out, been withdrawn from circulation by the Federal Reserve, and melted for their metal content. While the survivors show obvious signs of wear, ranging from heavy circulation with details worn smooth to light circulation with minor wear on the high points, and these circulated examples are worth essentially face value, maybe $1 or $2 to a collector completing a date set, absolutely common and easily replaced. But uncirculated examples, quarters that never entered commerce, that were preserved in mint sets or saved from bankrolls, that retain their original mint luster and pristine surfaces, these are infinitely more scarce. And as you move up the grading scale from MS-60, uncirculated but with numerous marks and poor eye appeal, toward MS-65, MS-66, MS-67, and beyond, the population drops dramatically because you're now talking about coins that are exceptionally well preserved, that survived. nearly 4 decades in pristine condition, that exhibits strong luster, sharp strikes, clean surfaces, and excellent eye appeal. When PCGS or NGC grades a 1986 P. Washington quarter, they're examining every aspect of the coin under high magnification, evaluating strike quality, how completely the design transferred from the dies, whether all details are sharp and fully formed, surface preservation, checking for marks, scratches, spots, discoloration, environmental damage, or any other imperfections. Luster quality, assessing whether the coin exhibits strong, original mint bloom with cartwheel effect or whether the luster has been compromised by handling or cleaning. And eye appeal, the overall aesthetic impact, how the coin presents visually, whether it's attractive and desirable. And based on these comprehensive evaluations, they assign a precise numerical grade that positions the coin exactly on the Sheldon scale from 1 to 70. A 1986 P. Washington quarter grading MS 64 might show scattered contact marks and slightly subdued luster, worth perhaps $15 to $25, while an MS 65 with better surfaces might bring $40 to $60. But as you climb toward MS 66, you're entering territory where only hundreds of examples might exist, where serious collectors compete for ownership, where prices jump to hundreds of dollars. And at MS 67, you might be talking about dozens of known examples, coins that are virtually perfect to the naked eye, worth thousands of dollars, while MS 68 specimens are extraordinarily rare, with perhaps fewer than 10 known examples, worth tens of thousands, and an MS 69 would be breathtakingly rare, potentially the single finest known example, worth hundreds of thousands of dollars just for the grade alone. But here's where we reach that $39 million valuation. Because when you take a major error like a 50% off-center strike or a dramatically rotated double strike or a wrong planchet error, and that error coin also happens to be in gem uncirculated condition grading MS 67 or higher, you've created something that transcends normal numismatic categories and becomes a world-class rarity that museums, elite private collectors, and institutional investors will compete ferociously to acquire. Picture a 1986 P. Washington quarter struck 55% off-center, showing only Washington's hair and part of his profile with the rest completely blank. And this spectacular error is an MS 68 condition with flawless surfaces, blazing luster, and perfect eye appeal, certified and encapsulated by PCGS with guaranteed authenticity. This is the type of coin that could command $39 million when two billionaire collectors find themselves competing for it at a major auction, bidding against each other with increments climbing by millions until one finally secures ownership of this numismatic treasure. The market for high-grade modern era coins has been growing exponentially as collectors increasingly recognize that errors from recent decades are actually rarer than errors from earlier periods, because quality control systems became so much more sophisticated, which means that errors which escaped modern detection systems represent truly exceptional rarities that will only become more valuable as time passes and more collectors enter the market chasing a fixed supply of available specimens. What makes the 1986 P. Washington quarter particularly exciting for potential treasure hunters is that numismatic researchers believe more examples of valuable errors from this year may still exist undiscovered compared to the other dates we've discussed, because 1986 was right in that sweet spot where production quantities were massive, 551 million coins, creating many opportunities for errors, but quality control hadn't yet reached the near perfection of the 1990s. Plus, 1986 is recent enough that many coins from that year survived in various forms of storage, accumulation, or collection, meaning your chances of actually finding a valuable 1986 P are arguably better than finding comparable errors from other years. So, what exactly should you look for when examining 1986 P. Washington quarters, and what are the specific characteristics that signal you might have found something valuable? First, examine every 1986 P quarter you encounter with careful attention. Use good lighting, preferably natural daylight or bright LED light, and use a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe to see details clearly, because some errors are subtle while others are immediately obvious. Check if the design is properly centered. Look at the rim around the entire coin to see if there's even spacing between the design elements and the edge. If you see any blank areas where design should appear, if Washington's profile is cut off, if the date is incomplete, if Liberty or In God We Trust runs off the edge, you may have found an off-center strike that could be worth serious money. Look carefully for any doubling in the design. Examine the date, 1986. Under magnification, checking each digit for doubled lines or shadowing. Inspect all lettering for signs of multiple impressions. Study Washington's profile, particularly around distinctive features like the nose, mouth, eye, and hair for any indication of double details, because double dies and double strikes will show clear doubling that becomes obvious once you know what to look for. Check the coin's edge. It should have evenly spaced vertical reeds running around the entire circumference. If you find a 1986 P quarter with a completely smooth edge or partially smooth edge, you found a broad strike error worth investigating further. Compare the coin size to other quarters. While differences might be subtle, wrong planchet errors will be noticeably different in diameter. And if you have a scale, weigh any suspicious coins because a quarter should weigh exactly 5.67 grams. Anything significantly different suggests a wrong planchet error. Look for clips, indentations, or irregular shapes along the edge that might indicate clipped planchet errors, and examine the surfaces for any unusual textures, weak areas, or strange impressions that might indicate struck-through errors. Second, don't dismiss coins that appear uncirculated even without obvious errors, because a 1986 P. Washington quarter in MS 67 or higher grade has significant value in its own right. So if you find a quarter for 1986 that looks absolutely pristine with no wear whatsoever, with full blazing luster, with no spots, stains, or discoloration, that's a coin worth preserving and potentially having professionally graded. Third, think strategically about where to search for 1986 P quarters, because while some remain in circulation, your best chances are in accumulated collections that people have held for decades, in old coin jars and piggy banks, in mint sets for 1986 that people purchased and stored away, in estate sales where someone's lifetime accumulation is being liquidated, in inherited collections where coins pass from one generation to another, and in similar venues where coins from the 1980s might have been preserved either intentionally or accidentally. Fourth, consider systematically searching rolls of quarters obtained from banks, because while most rolls contain recent issues, older quarters do appear, and a $10 investment in a roll could potentially yield a multi-million-dollar discovery. Many significant error coins have been found exactly this way by persistent collectors who search through hundreds or thousands of coins. Fifth, connect with the numismatic community both online through forums, social media groups, and websites, and locally through coin clubs, coin shows, and dealer shops, because experienced collectors are incredibly generous with their knowledge and can help you identify finds, authenticate errors, recommend grading services, and eventually connect you with serious buyers when you're ready to sell. Sixth, if you believe you found a valuable 1986 P error or high-grade specimen, don't clean it, don't touch the surfaces, don't try to improve its appearance in any way, because cleaning destroys value. Instead, handle it only by the edges. Place it in a protective holder like a coin flip or capsule. Photograph it clearly from both sides. And seek professional opinions from reputable dealers, or consider submitting it directly to PCGS or NGC for authentication and grading. The story of the 1986 P. Washington quarter worth $39 million is ultimately a story of possibility, a reminder that extraordinary treasures can hide in the most ordinary places, that knowledge and attention can reveal wealth that others overlook, that the dream of discovering a fortune in your pocket change is absolutely real and achievable. Every single day, people just like you discover valuable coins in the most mundane circumstances, in change from purchases, in rolls from banks, in jars that have sat untouched for years, in collections inherited from relatives, and each discovery validates the excitement and potential that makes coin collecting such a thrilling pursuit. The four coins we've explored today, the 1990 D. Washington quarter worth $117 million, the 1984 P. Washington quarter worth $120 million, the 1995 P. Washington quarter worth $78 million, and finally this 1986 P. Washington quarter worth $39 million. Represent not just astronomical monetary values, but also incredible stories of American history. Minting technology, human error, preservation, discovery, and the enduring appeal of numismatics as a hobby that combines historical appreciation, aesthetic enjoyment, intellectual challenge, and financial opportunity. These coins prove that even in our modern era of sophisticated technology and quality control, remarkable errors still occur, that valuable coins are still being discovered, that anyone with knowledge and persistence can potentially find treasures that change their lives forever. So here's what I want you to do right now. Immediately after finishing this video, go check your change. Examine every quarter carefully. Look in that old jar of coins you've been meaning to sort through. Check your car's cup holder and console. Ask family members if they have any old coins saved away. Visit your local bank and request some rolls of quarters to search through, because somewhere out there, your fortune might be waiting. A 1990 D or a 1984 P or 1995 P or 1986 P Washington quarter, with a dramatic error or exceptional grade that could transform your financial future. The knowledge you've gained today gives you a massive advantage over the millions of people who spend these coins every day without realizing their potential value. You now know what to look for. You understand why certain coins are valuable. You recognize the error types that command premium prices, and you're equipped to spot opportunities that others miss. This isn't about luck, it's about knowledge. It's about taking the time to examine your coins carefully. It's about understanding what makes certain specimens valuable. It's about being persistent and patient in your search, because valuable coins are out there, waiting to be discovered, and there's absolutely no reason why you can't be the one who finds them. Remember that every great numismatic discovery started with someone who simply took the time to look, someone who didn't dismiss their pocket change as ordinary, someone who understood that extraordinary value can hide in plain sight. And now you have that same opportunity, that same knowledge, that same potential to discover something truly spectacular. Thank you so much for watching the Liberty Coins Hub. If you found this video valuable, please smash that like button. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss future videos about rare and valuable coins. Hit the notification bell so you're alerted whenever we post new content. And share this video with friends and family, because everyone deserves to know about the treasures potentially hiding in their pocket change. Drop a comment below telling me if you're going to start searching for these valuable Washington quarters. Let me know if you've ever found an error coin or valuable variety. Share your coin collecting stories and questions, because I love hearing from viewers and learning about your experiences in this incredible hobby. Now go forth armed with this knowledge. Start examining your quarters with new eyes. And who knows, maybe you'll be the next person to discover a multi-million-dollar treasure that's been hiding in plain sight all along. Happy hunting, and may fortune smile upon your search.